Right now we have Professor Bogdan Musiał in regards to Polish-German, he's a Polish-German historian, professor at the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University of Warsaw. He's going to be talking about who will help a Jew. Presentation in Polish, simultaneously interpreted in English. Okay.
Punishing solidarity, German legislation against aiding Jews in occupied Poland. You see this map? It's occupied Poland, German government, and so we know where is it. Oops. Okay, of around 3 million Polish Jews, only around 350,000 survived the war. How could it happen? This happened. What did the Poles not prevent this? Common explanations include Polish anti-Semitism, alleged Jewish passivity, supposedly inferior Polish morality, very popular last time, Poland as a nation of bystanders or even voluntaries of Holocaust. But, however, little research has been done on the impact of German legislation in occupied Poland. But sources strongly suggest that the German legislation and its implementation played a decisive role in discouraging aid in Poland to the Jews. It's a background, you know, what does it mean, anti-Jewish laws? I would like to show you the most important laws that the Germans implanted in Poland after the invasion, from September 1939. It's the first, it was from 1st December 1939, all Jews and Jewesses who reside in general government and above the age of 10 required to wear a white sash with a width and least 10 centimeters and with a star David on it. The penalty for non-adherence is imprisonment. The special courts are responsible for the enforcement of the regulation. We have the second regulation from 19th February 1940s, changed the penalties to imprisonment and to potentially unlimited fine or one of these penalties. Then we have anti-Jewish regulation regarding the prohibition for the Jews to use the railways in the general government from the 20th January 1940. There's a punishment, of course, similar like for the here. And the local authorities were given a fair amount of discretion in deciding on penalties, with the laws giving them the option of up to 3 months of imprisonment or fine up to 1,000 zloty. We have the second regulation from the 20th February 1941, banned Jews from using means and public transport such as trains, land vehicles, and well as boats and ferries unless they had a special permission. But most important was laws, legislation which for ghettoization. The first was from 13th September 1940s, the regulation on the restriction of movement in the general government, and the local authorities were given a fair amount of discretion deciding on penalties, with the laws giving them to the option of up to 3 months and imprisonment and or fine of up to 10,000 zloty. Here we have the second, from 29th April 1941, the penalties for leaving was just punishment was greater, but it doesn't change, of course. Those are similar. And it was a basic, a legal basis for the building of ghettos in the occupied Poland. If you see, most of the ghettos were in occupied Poland, maybe 80%, maybe 80%, maybe 19%, I don't know exactly. But we can see that most of them were in general government. From the beginning, both Poles and Jews were victimized by the German occupation. They were objects of massacres, arrests, economic exploitation, the confiscations, forced labor. The economic situation for the vast majority of Poles and of Jews deteriorated. Official food rations are nowhere near enough to survive. Maybe I need some translation. Oficjalne racje żywnościowe dla Żydów od 1940 roku wynosiły około 200 kalorii na dzień.
So the official food rations, the food that was given to the Jews were only 200 calories a day since 1940.
A dla Polaków, mieszkańców miast, około 600-700 kalorii.
And for the Poles living in that time in the cities, that were 600-700 calories a day.
To oznaczało śmierć w krótkim okresie czasu oczywiście, dla Polaków, dla Żydów wcześniej, dla Polaków trochę później.
That would mean both. That would mean death for both of them. The Jew would die earlier, and the Pole would die later.
But it happened. It didn't happen. Large Jewish ghettos were hit particularly hard. Starvation, hunger-related diseases. The most known example is from Warsaw and Łódź, Litzmannstadt. But we have emergence of smuggling and other forms of economic cooperation, Jewish cooperation. To oznaczało ratunek praktycznie dla milionów Żydów, setki tysięcy Żydów oraz Polaków, czyli ta wymiana handlowa, kooperacja między Polakami i Żydami.
So trading between Poles and Jews would mean that millions of both would live.
During the ghetto period, from 1940 to 1942, the Jews were physically separated from the Polish environment. A study of contemporary Jewish accounts reveals that despite the imposed separation, the Jews continued to maintain a positive image of Poland and the Poles and even reinforced the image to outside proportions. Notwithstanding specific crisis points, for a long time the Jews believed that the real spirit of Poland was expressed in the help extended to them and in acts of kindness that they witnessed. By the middle of 1942, we can discern the first doubts as to the Poles, fundamental positions toward the Jews. Yet even then, on the verge of annihilation, and despite their doubts, many of Poland's Jews still had faith in Poland and the Poles. Co jest istotne, to są badania na podstawie ówczesnych wspomnień, relacji i dzienników opisane przez panią Javi Dreyfus.
And the important thing is that this is a research based on some memoirs and diaries written by Harry Dreyfus from that time.
To nie jest polski badacz czy polska badaczka.
To nie jest polska badaczka.
Tak, to nie jest, to jest izraelska.
She's not a scientist. She's not a Polish researcher. She comes from Israel.
Yes. Initially, no legislation explicitly penalizing any Jews. German security police took matters in their own hands by putting offenders in protective custody, Schutzhaft. It means sent to the concentration camp. As example, when the Warsaw Bar Council refused to disbar its Jewish members, its leadership was sent to various concentration camps. It was protective custody, where they died. But punishment escalated and began to be announced publicly. The first was ordinance was issued by Ludwig Leist. He was a plenipotentiary of the governor of the city of Warsaw from the 14th of January 1941. He said, paragraph 2, Jews staying outside where the designated Jewish district without permission will be fined to 1,000 zloty. In case of inability to pay, they will be imprisoned for up to 3 months. Paragraph 3, it is also illegal to aid a Jew who violated paragraph 2 of the regulation. Paragraph B, not immediately report Jews staying outside of the designated Jewish district. In addition, Jews may be contrary to provisions above sentencing to long-term forced labor. Po raz pierwszy tutaj mamy zakaz, konkretny zakaz plus nakaz denuncjacji dla Polaków.
So for the first time we see that there is an obligation for Poles to stop or to prevent themselves from doing something and to report if they have been collaborating with a Jew.
1 month later, Ludwig Leist issued ordinance on 13th February 1941. It was forbidden to sell, donate, or otherwise give goods to any kind of Jews outside of the Jewish district in Warsaw. To się dotyczyło przede wszystkim żebraków żydowskich, dzieci żydowskich, którzy wychodziły z getta i żebrały za żywnością.
And that related mostly to the beggars, being adults and children who were coming out of the Jewish ghetto and they had no food and they were begging for food.
In every instance, both parties are subjected to the penalty. Violators will be fined 1,000 zloty, will be sentenced to up to 3 months. To nie były jeszcze ostre kary.
And there were not very severe punishments yet.
The ordinance both were novelty, explicitly penalized non-Jewish accomplices for the first time, vastly extending the scope of criminalization. Even giving food to starving Jewish orphans was banned. The Germans did not necessarily abide by their own laws. As example, Polish engineer Zbigniew Mroczkowski was arrested on the 10th of February 1941 for providing food to Jews. Despite only having to pay a fine, he was held in the Pawiak prison for 3.5 months and then sent to Auschwitz protective custody, and he died there. But the initial ordinance failed to decisively disrupt smuggling and aid. The Jewish economic cooperation continued to expand. W tym okresie ta współpraca tak zwana gospodarcza, szczególnie na prowincji, rozwijała się i ona była warunkiem do przeżycia ludności żydowskiej na prowincji, ale też w gettach, w miastach.
So this economic cooperation or this trading in the villages was the condition for the Jews to live by in ghettos and also in the cities. They would, and also in the prisons. They would not live without those economic cooperation.
The German authorities continued to ramp up penalties. They increased fines, higher prison sentences, confiscation of property, ban on all kinds of economic and humanitarian interaction. In the face of a continued failure, German bureaucrats were calling for the death penalty. To są, powiedzmy, tacy przywódcy, czyli przywódcy administracji niemieckiej cywilnej w Generalnej Guberni.
These are the leaders of the authorities of the general government.
Left to right, Ernst Kund, lawyer, Ludwig Fischer, doctor of law, Hans Frank, doctor of law, Otto Wächter, doctor of law, Ernst Zörner, kupiec, merchants, and Richard Wendler, doctor of law. Na początku 1941 roku, w środku 1941 roku zaczęła się dyskusja wśród niemieckich urzędników, wysokich urzędników, gdzie wymagano właśnie, że trzeba za te przestępstwa, czyli wychodzenie z getta i pomoc Żydom, karać śmiercią.
So at the beginning of 1941 and in the middle of 1941 there was a debate that led to the fact that all the people, especially members of the authorities, clerks, they would be put into camps and sentenced to death if they would help the Jews leaving the ghetto.
I to się stało dopiero 15 października 1941 roku. Tu widzimy rozporządzenie z 15 października generalnego gubernatora.
And that happened by the decree of the general governor on the 15th of October 1941, and we see that document here.
Here is a translation from, there's a point, on the 15th October 1941, the head of the legislative office of the general government, Dr. Albert Vin, submitted to Dr. Frank a draft regulation which, among others, included the death penalty for Jews who were found outside the districts without permission. This provision came into force the same day as the third regulation on the restriction of residence in the general government. Paragraph 4b of the regulation declares, Jews who leave the designated district without permission are subject to the death penalty. The same punishment applies to people who knowingly provide shelter to these Jews. Inciters and accomplices receive the same punishment as perpetrators. An attempt violation is treated like a violation. In less severe cases, a prison or harsh prison sentence may be instituted. The regulation will be enforced by the special courts. This is the first time that the death penalty was officially imposed on non-Jews helping Jews. Leading German officers felt this ordinance was too mild. Even this, they took the initiative and passed their own harsher ordinances. Note, there was no legal basis for this. It is, as an example, is Bekanntmachung obwieszczenie from the 10th of November 1941, and we have this announcement is from 10th November. Recently, it has been proven that wandering Jews who had left their designated residential districts are responsible for the spread of typhoid fever. In order to keep the public safe from harm, the general governor has ordered that any Jew who is caught outside his designated Jewish district will be sentenced to death. The same punishment is imposed on individuals who knowingly provide shelter or render any other kinds of assistance to these Jews. This is provide accommodation, maintenance, transporting them on one vehicles, and so on. It is important. That wasn't enough for the officers. They discussed, nevertheless, German officers continued to complain about the ineffectiveness of these measures. It is Bekanntmachung. I na początku 1942 roku zaczęła się znowu dyskusja wewnątrz, gdzie było dyskutowane i doszło do takiego wniosku, jakbym można powiedzieć.
So at the beginning of 1942, again the debate came back and they came to a conclusion, or to, we might say the conclusion.
In such Also in einem solchen Fall, in German, in solchen Fall verdient der Nicht-Jude womöglich noch eine härtere Bestrafung als der Jude. It means, in such a case, the non-Jew probably deserves a harsher punishment than the Jew. Co to oznacza? Dla Żyda była kara śmierci. Jak może być bardziej ostra kara niż kara śmierci, proszę Państwa?
So what does it mean? A Jew would be sentenced to death, and somebody helping the Jew would be condemned to something worse. Can there be any worse than a death penalty?
From summer 1942, we have the Operation Reinhardt, the evacuation of Polish Jews. Ghettos were liquidated, Jews deported to the slums to be murdered. Yeah. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of Jews escaped from the ghettos before or during the liquidations. To the previous experience, smuggling, aid, and so on, the Germans did not count on the possibility of assistance of the Polish population. We have as a letter, official letter from the SS police chief of District Radom, Dr. Böttcher, from the 21st September 1942. Quotation, the experience of the past week has shown that Jews are fleeing the smaller ghettos, especially ahead of evacuation. These Jews were almost certainly sheltered by Poles. I request to order all mayors and village heads to remind the inhabitants of the villages in the most emphatic way possible that every Pole who sheltered Jew violated the third regulation, and likewise not only Poles who shelter Jews, but also those who give or sell them food will be treated as accomplices. In all of these cases, the Poles will be subject to the death penalty. I przy tak zwanych wysiedleniach, akcjach oczywiście niemiecka administracja i Niemcy zabezpieczali się, flankowali takimi obwieszczeniami. Jest tu taki przykład, podałem.
And the German administration were using these kinds of announcements to make this, to spread the word, to keep the message going that it's going to be life-threatening for the people to help the Jews.
Tu jest w skrócie przetłumaczone na angielski. It's translated from the Tarnów. The Tarnów was Dr. Pernutz, and on his information on the 6th September, the deportation of Jews will take place. Any Pole who hinder the action is subject to the most severe penalties. Any Pole who during or after the operation gives shelter to a Jew will be shot. Anyone who buys anything for a Jew, direct or indirectly, accepts a gift or through other means acquires Jewish property is subject to severe punishment. And what's important, yes, when the Jews are being transported from the gathering place to railway stations, the public will be denied access to the streets and square where the transport will pass through. Czy to byli bystanders? Jeżeli wszystko zabronione było patrzeć z okna,
Were they bystanders if everything was forbidden and they were just looking at them from the window?
To jest podobne rozporządzenie, to było takie rozporządzenie we wszystkich miastach, praktycznie.
The decrees were very similar in all the cities.
Yeah. Były rozplakatowane wszędzie.
So there was a very similar decree that was printed and stuck and glued to the walls of every city. So it was all the same. Dopiero
28 października 1942 roku zostało jakby rozporządzenie policyjne.
Only on the 20th of October 1940 there was a police decree that was released.
Które zaostrzyło te wszystkie rozporządzenia.
And that police decree was much more strict than the previous decrees that were published in the different cities.
I ona obowiązywała do końca okupacji.
And that police decree was valid until the end of the occupation.
To jest paragraf 3, translation. Jews who violated were death, of course, but the same penalty was subject to whoever knowingly gives shelter to such a Jew who is particular. Pardon? Okay, is this? Okay, it is 14. Sorry. Was this official? Is this okay? Okay, this. Yes. Każdy może przeczytać to, co tu jest na to napisane. Yeah. Good. szczególnie punkt trzeci jest ciekawy. Point 3 is very interesting. Anyone who knows that the Jews are staying outside the Jewish resident district without permission, but who fails to notify the police will be subject to security police measures. Są policyjne środki ubezpieczenia. De facto it was a death penalty. What does it mean, the regulation from 28th October 1942? Death penalty for any kind of aid, de facto death penalty for the failure to report aid, execution of the entire family. Is an example, okay, because of that, is an example of the such action against the Poles. It's very important. The Germans did massacres because of this regulation. The massacres were generally done in public to instill terror. Villagers were often forced towards the killings. In many cases, the villagers were forced to carry away the property they killed and they buried their corpses. Before departing, the Germans made sure to warn the survivors to not hide the Jews. These measures worked, and the willingness to hide the Jews plummeted. In many cases, peasants gave away the Jews they had been hiding after such an action occurred in a nearby village. It is some example of a report from the Council of Eight. It is from this book which I cited before. Oh, pardon. Okay, sorry. Okay, it was yes. It was from Dreyfus, this Israel researcher. The positive image was sheltered of the Poles was shattered and replaced by the extremely hostile outlook. From them on, end of 1942, Jews began to see the Poles as party to the persecution, and there were even those who blamed the Poles for the Germans' determination to annihilate them. The situation in Poland was unique in Europe, but for the most part, no legislation specifically banning aid Jews were in different countries. Punishment was low, usually a fine or short prison sentence. Exception was Ukraine, Belarus. But this conclusion, German legislation against aiding Jews in Poland evolved gradually. At the beginning, no specific anti-aid laws. Then fines and low prison sentences. On 15th October 1941, death penalty. October 1942, de facto death penalty for the failure to report, public executions and families. German administrators consistently felt that ever-increasing penalties were needed because, from the German point of view, Polish society was too eager to help the Jews. In the end, it was a German policy of public executions of entire families that broke the Poles' willingness to save their Jewish neighbors, not Polish anti-Semitism, passivity of the Poles, allegedly inferior memorial values. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.